Imagine a universe where Rick Sanchez, genius, reckless, and utterly unpredictable, slips through the cracks of reality straight into the grim darkness of Warhammer 40K. One misstep, one burst of portal energy, and he's standing amidst godlike warriors, towering war machines, and daemons that can twist reality itself. Will his chaotic intellect survive the relentless horrors of the 41st millennium? Or will even Rick finally meet his match? Rick Sanchez blinked into the Warhammer 40K galaxy with a sound like a fizzing neutron star, stepping out of his portal with one foot on the cracked, ash-strewn surface of a planet that looked like it had been bombed for 1,000 years straight. The sky was a sickly orange, streaked with black smoke from distant industrial cities and shattered spaceports. He squinted against the harsh light, adjusting the collar of his lab coat as he took in the landscape. "Morty's gonna freak out if he sees this," he muttered to himself, fumbling in his pocket for another flask of whatever strong liquid he had managed to smuggle through the portal. Around him, the planet's terrain was a chaotic tapestry of ruined buildings, cratered plains, and massive fortifications half buried in molten slag. Somewhere in the distance, faint echoes of artillery fire vibrated through the air, each shot resonating like a warning. This was not a playground, even for a multiverse-traveling mad scientist. Rick's eyes darted to the horizon, noting the colossal towers that loomed like sleeping giants, and the enormous starships that drifted silently above, casting shadows like giant black wings. He knew immediately he was nowhere near Earth, no matter how warped his sense of scale had gotten from interdimensional travel. This was something entirely different, something vast and terrifying. Rick flicked a small gadget on his wrist, a scanner he'd thrown together in seconds, and watched as it buzzed and whirred, picking up faint psychic signatures and life forms in the immediate vicinity. Imperial guard patrols were crawling somewhere out there, the reading suggested, but they were a mere fraction of the combatants in this sector. Rick tilted his head, smiling in that way he did when he knew he had walked straight into something utterly insane. "Oh, they are not gonna like me. Or maybe they will. Who knows? Who even cares?" he said, taking a cautious step forward, the ground crunching under his boots. His portal gun was clutched tightly in his other hand, ready for instant escape if something decided to end his short-lived experiment in galactic tourism. Every few moments, he would pause and tilt his head, listening to the sounds of distant engines and explosions, noting how the air itself seemed to hum with a strange, oppressive energy. This place was alive in a way that was almost conscious, like the planet itself could sense an intruder who was not supposed to be here. He started walking toward a ridge that overlooked a valley filled with ruins, a ruined city sprawling across miles of scarred earth. Rick's gaze swept over the remnants of defensive structures, barricades, and what looked like burned-out vehicles, their twisted metal skeletons jutting from the ground like broken teeth. Yeah, super dark, super gothic, real spooky, Rick," he muttered sarcastically, pulling a tiny holographic projector from his coat and flicking it on. Maps and coordinates blinked in midair, and he started to compare the spatial anomalies he was detecting to known star charts in his memory banks. Nothing matched. Nothing even came close. The scale, the architecture, the sheer density of destruction. It was as if every corner of the galaxy had decided to cram all its wars into one tiny spot. And then someone had added some extra chaos just to be ironic. As he descended the ridge, Rick's boots kicked up clouds of ash and grit, revealing remnants of humanoid figures in armor. His scanner picked up low-level life readings nearby. Rick squinted and muttered under his breath, "Imperial meatbags. Yep, classic." He could see movement now. Shapes moving with mechanical precision in the distance, patrolling the broken streets. Even from afar, their presence radiated authority and a rigid, almost oppressive sense of order. Rick's grin widened. Ah, nothing like meeting the locals. Let's see how polite they are when I start waving a plasma rifle around. He flexed his fingers experimentally, thinking about the possible combinations of gadgets, explosives, and tech hijacks he could pull off, knowing full well that the Imperium of Man did not deal kindly with intruders, especially ones that could teleport through reality. Rick paused and crouched behind the jagged remains of a collapsed tower, taking a long swig from his flask and surveying the area. Smoke twisted in spirals from distant fires, creating a hazy, almost surreal effect over the war-torn landscape. In the distance, a massive statue of some long-forgotten emperor glared down with eyes that might have been psychic lenses, scanning for threats. "Oh, the melodrama is strong here," Rick muttered, smirking at the sheer scale of the statues and the intense devotion that had gone into every crack and chip of stone. Every element of the city screamed conflict and fervor, and Rick's mind raced with possible explanations, theories, and sarcastic commentaries that would make sense in a multiverse context. He could feel the latent tension in the air, the kind of tension that made entire planetary populations either rise up or get incinerated. Rick's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden rumble that shook the ground, as if the planet itself had exhaled a massive sigh. The sound came from the sky, where a massive cruiser slowly drifted through the orange haze. Its hull was adorned with intricate symbols and banners that rippled despite the lack of wind. Rick tilted his head, analyzing the technology with an intensity that mixed curiosity, awe, and that trademark, barely contained chaos that defined him. Okay, that's not just a ship. That's a floating fortress, and it's probably armed to the teeth, he whispered, half to himself and half to the universe. His fingers itched for his portal gun, itching to see how it would perform in a firefight of truly cosmic proportions. Every instinct screamed at him that he had stumbled into a world where survival was optional and insanity was mandatory. Rick took a deep breath, scanning the horizon once more. The distant sound of artillery was growing louder, synchronized with the low hum of massive engines and the occasional screech of metal-on-metal collisions. Shadows of titanic war machines crawled across the devastated plains like monstrous insects, their feet crushing remnants of buildings without a second thought. The scale of destruction was staggering, and Rick's mind raced to calculate the odds of escaping alive. He smiled, that chaotic, manic grin, realizing that he had found the perfect playground for someone like him. A place where technology, war, and madness intertwined at a cosmic scale. And as the winds carried ash and fire across the valley, Rick adjusted his portal gun, muttered a few sarcastic notes about the galaxy, and began walking toward the ruins, already scheming, already observing, already imagining the chaos he could unleash in a universe that seemed designed to eat intruders alive. Rick Sanchez crouched behind a jagged chunk of rubble, peering through the cracked visor of his improvised scanner at a squad of Imperial guardsmen patrolling the ruined streets below. They moved in perfect unison, their armor battered but functional, lasguns held at the ready, eyes scanning every shadow as if the very air could betray them. Rick muttered to himself, "Oh yeah, the uniform march, though we're very serious thing. Classic humans." He adjusted his portal gun on his hip, testing its readiness, not because he planned to shoot, well, not yet, but because he knew that any sudden misstep could turn this casual observation into a galactic-sized funeral. The guardsmen were oblivious to the interdimensional intruder crouched above them, their discipline a stark contrast to Rick's usual chaotic energy. He shook his head and laughed quietly, the sound echoing strangely in the open ruins. "Oh, Morty, if you could see this, all that training, all that discipline, and they still wouldn't notice a drunk old man staring at them from 10 meters away." Rick carefully stepped over debris, moving closer to get a better look at their formation, his scanner beeping faintly as it picked up biotic and psychic signatures. Oh, low-level psychic readings, nothing fancy, not even a commissar nearby to yell at them. "Yet," he murmured, noting the way the guardsmen interacted with one another. One of them paused, scanning a building with a rifle that looked like it could obliterate most Earth tanks. Rick's eyes widened behind his goggles. "Okay, that's definitely more firepower than we have in the garage back home. And they're just regular soldiers. Yikes." He flicked a small hologram to life in his hand, mapping their patrol route, making mental notes about where he could sneak in, where he could set up a distraction, and, most importantly, where he could avoid being turned into target practice. Rick's grin widened. This was the perfect field test for his new, highly illegal, probably unethical inventions. As he watched, one guardsman muttered something to another, words lost in the wind, but the tone unmistakable, cautious, experienced, ready to die for reasons Rick didn't even begin to understand. Rick rolled his eyes. Existential dread. Another classic human pastime. They march, they die, they get medals. Boring. He crouched lower, pulling out a small device that emitted a holographic projection of a tiny, harmless-looking critter scuttling across the ground. The guardsmen immediately reacted, rifles raised, scanning the area. Rick snickered. "And that, my friends, is how you start a panic without actually touching anyone. Science, baby." He clicked the device off, watching as confusion lingered in the soldiers' movements, the smallest disruption sending ripples through their otherwise perfect formation. Rick's attention shifted to a nearby ruin, where he noticed the guardsman taking cover behind a crumbling wall. "Ah, strategic minds. Love it," he whispered. He raised his hand, pointing his portal gun at the wall and generating a tiny, flickering dimensional portal. Through it, a miniature version of a tank appeared, clanking and rumbling as if it were real, complete with sound effects. The guardsmen's heads snapped in unison, rifles raised higher, scanning for the threat. Rick laughed quietly, shaking his head. Yeah, panic-induced precision firing. Adorable. You're all so predictable." He crouched lower, taking notes, already plotting how to manipulate their rigid sense of duty and hierarchy for maximum effect later. Suddenly, one guardsman stepped slightly out of formation, a movement so subtle most would have missed it. Rick froze, heart racing with that thrill he always felt when danger got real. The man's eyes narrowed, scanning the area with uncanny precision. Rick's grin faltered slightly. "Okay, that's a level of awareness I didn't budget for," he muttered, adjusting his portal gun to fire a distraction in a different location. Sparks flew as a rock was teleported mid-air to land with a loud clang near another patrol, drawing the guardsman's gaze away. Rick exhaled slowly, the rush of near detection making him giddy. Woohoo! Close call. Nothing like almost getting shot in a new universe to wake you up in the morning. He paused behind another piece of rubble, peering out as the patrol continued. Their armor clinked softly with each step, insignias reflecting the dim light of the burning horizon. Rick's mind raced with combinations of tricks, diversions, and sarcastic quips he could unleash. He could sense the tension between their unwavering loyalty and the sheer absurdity of his presence here. A chaotic, drunk scientist staring them down from above. "Man, this is like watching a chess game where I'm the cat that's gonna knock everything over," he whispered. He pulled out a tiny explosive from his coat, examining it with an almost scientific fascination, considering where to drop it to create confusion without actually harming anyone. "It's all about psychological chaos, Morty. The art of war with a twist." The guardsmen moved closer to a pile of rubble, signaling to one another with subtle hand gestures. Rick squinted, realizing they were following a predetermined route and communicating silently. The kind of coordination that would make most Earth generals weep in envy. He muttered under his breath, "I gotta hand it to them. All that training and still so serious about every little thing. Cute." He stood for a brief moment to get a better angle, the wind whipping his coat as he scanned their positions. Each step of the patrol revealed more about the Imperial Guard's strict routines, their hierarchy, their discipline. Rick made mental notes for later, thinking about how he could exploit their rules, their rituals, and their predictable behavior to his advantage. Rick's eyes caught a glint of movement from a nearby rooftop. Another patrol, smaller, scouting from above. "Oh, this just keeps getting better," he muttered, adjusting his portal gun to create a small distraction in a distant alley. The guardsmen reacted instantly, rifles moving in unison, scanning the wrong direction. Rick chuckled, the thrill of minor manipulation making him giddy. He crouched again, swirling the liquid in his flask, feeling the strange satisfaction of controlling chaos in a universe that seemed designed to crush intruders like him. The city was alive with war, but here he was, observing, interacting, testing the limits of a disciplined army that had no idea that reality itself was bending around them in subtle, impossible ways. Rick Sanchez squinted up at the massive figure striding across the ruined plains, its power armor glinting in the dim light like a walking cathedral of war. Space Marines. A thought alone made Rick's eyebrows arch, part fear, part awe, and part that manic excitement that always bubbled just under his sarcastic exterior. He could feel the raw psychic weight of them, the hum of power armor servos vibrating in the air, each step making the ground tremble slightly, a reminder that these were no ordinary soldiers. They were genetically enhanced, indoctrinated warriors bred for war, loyal to a cause Rick couldn't even begin to understand. "Oh boy," he muttered, adjusting his portal gun as if that small device could somehow balance the odds. "This is big. Way bigger than the local meatbags. Holy crap, Morty. We might actually be toast this time." He ducked behind a toppled statue, scanning the approaching figures with his scanner, noting every emblem, every insignia, every psychic imprint radiating from their helmets. The Space Marines moved with almost supernatural coordination, a machine-like efficiency that contrasted sharply with the improvisational chaos Rick thrived in. As they drew closer, Rick could hear the faint hiss of servo motors and the low thrum of their bolters priding. The air around them seemed charged, heavy with expectation and lethal potential. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment sink in, then let out a low, sarcastic whistle. Yeah, Holy Marines of Doom, coming to snatch me up for interdimensional trespassing. Got it." He shifted slightly, careful not to draw attention, though part of him was irresistibly curious to see how these monolithic beings would react to someone like him, a lone, unpredictable anomaly with zero allegiance to their cause. He glanced at the scanner, noting their psychic shielding and their armor's resilience, mentally calculating escape routes, distractions, and potential leverage. "Oh, this is gonna be fun," in a please don't get me killed sort of way. Rick edged closer to a crumbling wall to get a better view, muttering commentary under his breath. "Look at 'em, Morty. Pure muscle, pure terror, and probably the most boring conversation in the galaxy. I bet they talk about duty and honor at parties." Yawn. He twirled a small device between his fingers, a gadget designed to emit low-level holographic illusions. With a flick, he projected faint, ghostly images that danced along the rubble near the Marines. And immediately, their heads turned, bolters raised, scanning for the disturbance. Rick's grin widened. "Oh yes, attention diverted. I'm like the ultimate interdimensional prankster/spy." He ducked lower, watching as the massive warriors investigated with precise, almost terrifying efficiency, realizing quickly that their experience on countless battlefields made them impervious to minor illusions. Yet their presence still gave Rick that adrenaline rush he loved. One Space Marine stopped in his tracks, turning slowly, and Rick could feel the mental weight of scrutiny. He froze, scanning the giant warrior, trying to gauge if the being had the slightest notion of what he was. The Marine's helmeted head tilted ever so slightly, and Rick felt that piercing gaze, the kind that could probably read his intentions, or at least sense the chaotic energy swirling around him. Okay, chill, big guy. I'm just here for the sightseeing tour, he whispered, the words lost to the roar of distant artillery. He slowly raised a hand in a mock salute, a combination of nervous humor and desperate charm. Hey, big guy, love the armor. Real classic galactic tank with personality vibe. The Marine didn't respond, of course, and Rick rolled his eyes. Yeah, tough crowd, Morty. As the Space Marines moved on, Rick ducked lower, scanning their formation and noting every movement, every tactical choice. He was fascinated by the rigid efficiency of their patrol pattern, the subtle ways in which they covered one another, and the sheer physicality of beings who were essentially walking fortresses. These guys are like genetically enhanced robots with attitudes and a side of death, he muttered. He jotted notes on a small holographic pad, scribbling schematics and tactical observations. If he could ever replicate even a fraction of their durability and awareness, he thought, he could survive nearly anywhere in the multiverse, though something told him that was probably a terrible idea. Rick noticed a banner emblazoned with the symbol of their chapter, fluttering slightly despite the lack of wind. It gave him an idea, one that sparked with his usual blend of genius and recklessness. He could manipulate the symbols, create illusions, maybe even redirect their attention briefly to perform a small, controlled experiment. He chuckled softly. Oh, I am going to have so much fun with these big, shiny toys. Careful, Rick. Don't get yourself vaporized yet. He tested a microportal behind the nearest Marine, letting a faint gust of smoke drift through, watching as the enormous warrior's sensors picked up the disturbance. The Marine paused, armored fists clenching around the bolter, the other members of the squad shifting to investigate. Rick ducked lower, heart pounding, loving the thrill of dancing on the edge of catastrophic danger. The battlefield around them seemed almost to bend to their presence, the ruined city quieting in their immediate vicinity, as if the entire environment acknowledged their supremacy. Rick squinted at the details, noting scorch marks, crushed buildings, and the remnants of countless skirmishes. Yeah, absolute power, ultimate warriors, all that jazz. Just don't kill me, please, he muttered, adjusting his portal gun for a quick exit plan. He moved slightly, keeping his body hidden behind debris, his mind racing with possibilities. Could he convince them he was a friendly scientist? Could he manipulate the rules of physics just enough to nudge them off their standard patrol without being noticed? The potential was intoxicating. As the squad finally moved further into the ruins, Rick exhaled a long, shaky breath, adrenaline mixing with fascination and fear. His scanner hummed faintly, picking up residual psychic signatures, and he grinned widely. Oh, now that was a meet and greet. Space Marines, Morty? They're bigger, meaner, and way more serious than any authority figure we've ever met. But hey, that's just another Tuesday in the multiverse, right? He adjusted his coat, dusted off his hands, and prepared to follow them cautiously, ready to observe, interact, and, inevitably, meddle with the galaxy's most disciplined warriors, in a way only Rick Sanchez could. Rick Sanchez could feel it the moment he stepped past the shattered gates of the ruined fortress. The warp was wrong, thick, sticky, almost, like a viscous syrup that crawled along the edges of perception, tugging at thoughts, whispering promises and threats in a language Rick didn't fully understand, but could sense all too well. He paused mid-step, squinting through the orange haze and ash-choked wind, feeling the hairs on his neck stand on end. Oh yeah, now this is getting spicy, he muttered, spinning his portal gun in his hand almost absent-mindedly, the device suddenly seeming both fragile and insufficient in the presence of something so raw, so fundamentally chaotic. The air shimmered around him in subtle distortions, small glimpses of impossible geometries flickering at the corner of his vision. Yep, definitely not a tourist attraction, he said, adjusting the goggles over his eyes, trying to parse the subtle signals of psychic energy twisting through the environment. Somewhere deep in the planet, buried beneath rubble and forgotten temples, something waited, something aware of intruders, something drawn irresistibly toward anomalies like Rick. He moved cautiously through the ruins, boots crunching over ash and debris, every step accompanied by faint psychic murmurs that seemed to thread through the stones themselves. The air was alive with tension, the type of oppressive energy that could make a seasoned veteran soldier second-guess their instincts. Rick grinned despite himself, the kind of grin reserved for situations that were dangerous, thrilling, and vaguely insane. Oh, Morty's gonna wet himself when he sees this, he whispered, scanning the ground for signs of warp-tainted life forms. Tiny shadows flickered just beyond perception. Daemonic whispers curled around the edges of his mind, hinting at promises of power, knowledge, or disintegration. And Rick felt a shiver of both excitement and professional caution. He tilted his head, analyzing the signals with his scanner, but the readings were inconsistent, chaotic, almost laughing at him. A sudden, subtle distortion flickered to his right, a ripple in the air that suggested something moving or existing where it shouldn't. Rick froze, lowering himself behind a ruined wall, portal gun at the ready. His mind raced with possibilities. This could be a daemon, a warp entity, or worse, some psychic trap laid for intruders like him. He whispered under his breath, "Oh yeah, the warp doesn't just whisper. It practically screams when you show up, Rick. And right now, it's screaming at me." The air seemed to hum, vibrating with impossible frequencies that tugged at the edges of thought, making his brain itch and his synapses fire in erratic patterns. He laughed softly, the sound more nervous than amused. "Oh, I love it. Absolute chaos. You know, some people pay thousands of credits to experience a little chaos. I just step through a portal." Rick crept further, eyes darting as the air shimmered again. A low moan, faint but unmistakable, crawled over the ruins, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. He paused to analyze it, his scanner spiking with erratic readings that could have meant dozens of things, none of them good. Oh, fantastic. A spatial anomaly and auditory hallucinations? This is basically a Disneyland ride for mad scientists. He crouched lower, adjusting a dial on his portal gun to stabilize the local dimensional frequency, trying to insulate himself from the subtle tug of the warp. The device hummed faintly, tiny sparks dancing along its surface, giving him a small sense of security, though he knew it was laughably temporary. Anything powerful enough to manipulate the warp in this sector could probably vaporize his little gadget without even realizing it. A sudden flash of green light caught his eye, flickering across a crumbled wall like firelight dancing in a storm. Rick's heart skipped a beat, though he tried to mask it with a casual, sarcastic, "Oh, that's cute, little green glowy thing. Probably harmless. Probably." He crept closer, scanning for movement, his mind buzzing with theories. It could be a warp-tainted artifact, a daemon scouting party, or some residual psychic imprint left over from millennia of conflict. Rick noted every detail, from the faint heat signatures to the way shadows warped unnaturally across the rubble. He began whispering calculations and commentary to himself, almost like narrating a show for an invisible audience. Yeah, chaos loves the drama. But so do I, just in a slightly more self-serving way. As he stepped further into the ruined plaza, the psychic pressure intensified, wrapping around his thoughts like sticky fog. Small whispers became fleeting words, fragmented and alien, yet somehow intelligible. Power, control, destruction. Rick paused, tilting his head, feeling both irritated and fascinated. Oh yeah, subtlety is not your strong suit, Warp, but I can roll with it, I think. His portal gun vibrated faintly in his hand, sensing the ambient chaos, as if reacting to the invisible threads of the warp. He tested a micro-portal near a floating shard of debris, watching it blink in and out of existence. The warp reacted, tiny ripples, subtle distortions, almost like it noticed him challenging its rules. Rick's grin widened. "Oh, so you do notice me. Good. Game on." He crouched behind a broken wall, scanning the plaza as shadows stretched unnaturally across the terrain. Tiny flashes of daemon-like forms appeared and vanished in the corner of his vision. Some humanoid, some completely alien, flickering between dimensions. Rick whispered, almost in awe, "Morty, this is what happens when physics takes a vacation and insanity moves in to redecorate." He adjusted the portal gun again, running simulations in his head on how to manipulate the warp's chaotic energy without getting shredded into subatomic particles. The thrill was intoxicating. Every whisper, every ripple, every subtle shift in the psychic environment was both a warning and an invitation, and Rick, naturally, could not resist stepping closer, drawn by curiosity, chaos, and that unshakable need to poke the universe in the eye and see what happened. Rick Sanchez stepped cautiously into the cavernous hall of the Adeptus Mechanicus Forge World, the air thick with the scent of burning metal and ozone. Gigantic machines groaned and thrashed, limbs and treads moving with terrifying precision, overseen by red-robed tech priests whose mechanical augmentations gleamed in the dim light like a nest of spiders made of brass and steel. Sparks flew from massive cogitators, some so large that Rick's mind struggled to comprehend the scale, and he muttered under his breath, "Oh, Morty, this is basically mecha heaven with a hint of religious hysteria. I could live here. For a week, maybe." He ducked behind a support beam, scanning the intricate interplay of wires, tubes, and pistons that stretched across the chamber like veins of a living machine. The tech priests moved with slow, deliberate motions, chanting prayers to the machine god, their mechanical eyes glowing faintly as they inspected various constructs and devices. Rick's grin widened. The combination of devotion and technology was almost too absurd to resist. Ah, sacred machinery worship, classic humans. And here I thought my lab was over-engineered. He crept closer, careful to avoid detection, though part of him was already itching to interact with the technology. He pulled a small interface from his coat, a portable hacking device he'd cobbled together, and began scanning the nearest cogitator. The readings were incomprehensible in conventional terms, encrypted, layered with protective wards, and interwoven with prayers that seemed to function as both code and ritual. Rick chuckled softly, tilting his head. Oh, I love a challenge. A little divine encryption, a little sacred circuitry, makes a man feel alive. He reached out with a trembling hand, just brushing against the glowing wires, and felt the hum of ancient machines resonate through his fingertips. Sparks of data and raw energy danced along the device in his hand, almost as if it recognized his presence, questioning his audacity. Morty, this is like touching the heart of the universe. Except it probably wants to melt my face off. As he moved deeper into the forge, Rick noticed a massive tech priest tending to a colossal war engine, its chassis bristling with weapons and conduits feeding into its central power core. The priest's mechanical appendages moved with astonishing precision, soldering, calibrating, and monitoring simultaneously. And Rick's eyes gleamed with fascination. "Oh, look at that multitasking, Morty. I do 3 things at once, and I get messy lab explosions. This guy, he's basically a walking Swiss army of death and religion." He ducked behind a conveyor, watching as the priest's servo arms whirred and twisted with uncanny grace, adjusting delicate circuitry while simultaneously chanting prayers in binary encoded Low Gothic. Rick's mind raced with possibilities: temporary sabotage, harmless diversions, small manipulations, maybe even borrowing some tech for later escapades. He could feel the hum of potential experiments vibrating through the floor beneath him. Rick's attention was caught by a cluster of smaller machines, drones, and servitors, all moving in concert, like a choreographed dance of death and utility. Each emitted low mechanical whirs, lights blinking rhythmically in response to unseen signals. Rick leaned closer, scanning the control nodes with his portable device. Oh, beautiful. Organic, inorganic, all dancing together, Morty. Reminds me of the time I tried to make a toaster that could play chess. Except these are alive in some horrific way. He reached out to adjust a minor node, causing a small servitor to twitch and realign, perfectly in sync with the others despite the disruption. Rick grinned, almost clapping his hands softly. Yep, disruption without annihilation. That's my style. A red-robed priest noticed the faint disturbance, the mechanical eye glowing brighter as it scanned the hall. Rick froze, heart hammering, and whispered, "Oh, they noticed something." No, they didn't. Yes, maybe, no. The priest's gaze swept over him, and Rick ducked behind a massive conduit, mentally calculating the odds of being vaporized, assimilated, or dragged before the omnicia for questioning. Okay, Plan B, he muttered, tapping a sequence into his device that projected a small holographic distraction across the chamber. Sparks flew, alarms chimed softly, and the priest immediately diverted attention, moving toward the disturbance with slow, deliberate grace. Rick exhaled, suppressing laughter. Heh, who says chaos can't be a little elegant? Rick continued deeper, fascinated by the fusion of faith and technology. Massive cogitators lined the walls, their surfaces etched with sacred diagrams, runes, and technical schematics. Servitors moved tirelessly, their mechanical limbs operating with preternatural coordination, while priests monitored every calculation, every output, every spark of energy. Rick's grin widened as he realized the absurd genius of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a society so devoted to technology that devotion itself became a functional tool. Morty, it's like religion, but useful and slightly terrifying. He reached out to touch a control panel, feeling the vibrations of countless calculations thrumming beneath his fingers. Sparks danced as his device interfaced, reading just enough to satisfy curiosity without triggering alarms. Yep, this is basically poking a giant mechanical god with a stick, scientifically. As he moved toward the central chamber, a massive war engine, nearly the size of a building, thrummed with life. Cables snaked from it like veins, connecting to every wall, floor, and ceiling. Rick crouched behind a support strut, scanning it intently, already imagining ways to leverage it, tinker with it, or just watch it explode spectacularly from a safe distance. He whispered under his breath, "Oh, sacred machinery, you and me, we're gonna have some fun, or I'm gonna die. Either way, adventure." The room itself seemed alive, resonating with purpose, devotion, and barely contained potential for destruction. Rick's fingers itched for interaction, for experimentation, for chaos, the kind that only a universe of sacred tech could inspire, where every machine had a soul, and every priest had a spark of madness behind their glowing eyes. Rick Sanchez slammed the portal gun shut with a grunt, wiping sweat from his brow, when a familiar, panicked voice echoed behind him. "Rick, what is this place?" Morty stumbled into the ruined plaza, eyes wide, trying to take in the apocalyptic scene around them. The sky was choked with ash and smoke. Titanic ruins loomed in every direction, and faint glimpses of massive war machines crawled across the distant plains. Morty's usual nervous energy was dialed up to 11, his hands flailing as he tried to navigate a landscape that made even Rick pause for thought. "Morty, calm down. Jesus, the chaos this planet radiates could fry a brain faster than your history test prep," Rick muttered, adjusting his goggles and flicking a quick scan across the horizon. Morty froze mid-step, eyes darting from smoke to crumbling spires, noticing for the first time the distant patrols of Imperial guardsmen marching in precise formation. I don't even... What is that? Are those soldiers?" he stammered, voice trembling. Rick gave a faint chuckle, half mocking, half exasperated. "Yeah, Morty, soldiers. Big, scary, very serious ones. And they are not gonna like the likes of us." Morty shuffled closer to Rick, glancing nervously at the ruins beneath their feet. Every step kicked up ash and rubble, sending tiny clouds spiraling through the toxic air. He kept muttering under his breath, "This is insane. Why did we even come here? Rick, what did you do?" Rick waved a dismissive hand, already pulling out his scanner to analyze the incoming psychic and tech signals. "Relax, Morty. I may have accidentally picked the most chaotic, psychically unstable war zone in the galaxy to drop us in. But hey, it's fine, probably." Morty's eyes grew even wider, staring at a distant figure striding across the ruins, a space marine in towering power armor. Rick, is that thing alive? It's huge." Rick squinted, grinning beneath his goggles. "Yep, that's a space marine, Morty. Bigger, meaner, genetically enhanced, and almost certainly a walking tank with attitude problems. Don't touch it." As they edged through the rubble, Morty stumbled, nearly tripping over a chunk of metal that had once been a vehicle, now twisted beyond recognition. "I can't do this, it's too much," he cried, his voice echoing across the ruined plaza. Rick grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Morty, listen to me. You stick close. Don't run, and for God's sake, don't poke the warp-tainted debris unless you want to explode in ways even I can't fix. Got it?" Morty nodded frantically, glancing around at the flickering shadows and the faint greenish glow in the distance, where something malevolent and whispering waited in the psychic haze. Rick adjusted his portal gun, thinking several steps ahead, already planning contingencies for every possible death scenario. "Morty, you ever play chess? Well, now it's like chess, but the pieces want to rip your soul out, and the board changes shape every second." Morty let out a shaky laugh, trying to mask the fear with humor. "Oh, geez, Rick. That's terrifying." Rick grinned, patting Morty on the shoulder with one hand, while holding the portal gun ready in the other. "Terrifying? Morty, this is exhilarating. I mean, look at it. Massive machines, psychic anomalies, zealot priests worshipping death tech. This is like Christmas morning for mad scientists. But yeah, I get it. Your first real field trip to the galaxy of pain." Morty's eyes were glued to a nearby group of Adeptus Mechanicus servitors, their mechanical limbs moving in perfect, eerie synchronization. Rick, they're alive too, or sort of alive." Rick laughed, ducking behind a crumbling wall as he whispered, "Sort of, Morty. Mostly alive, mostly deadly, and mostly your nightmare if you touch them. But they made for good science experiments. Just observe, Morty. Don't touch. As they advanced carefully, Morty kept glancing over his shoulder, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of devastation. I feel like we're ants, Rick. Really tiny ants in a giant death machine. Rick smirked, adjusting his goggles to analyze distant patrol movements. Exactly, Morty. And guess what? Ants can survive by being sneaky, clever, and sometimes annoying. That's our game plan. And maybe, if we're lucky, a little chaotic trickery. He flicked his wrist, and a small holographic illusion of an exploding tank shimmered ahead, drawing the attention of a nearby guardsman patrol. Morty's jaw dropped. What did you just do? Did you just... Rick grinned widely. Distract, Morty. Keep up. Science and chaos all in one move. Morty took a deep breath, trying to steady himself as they ducked behind a ruined wall, watching the patrol react to the illusion. I don't know if I can handle this, Rick. It's all too much. Rick crouched beside him, tapping the portal gun against his palm. Morty, look at me. You can handle this. Just think. Observe, learn, survive, annoy the locals. That's all you need. And remember, wherever there's warp energy, explosions, or space marines, I am in charge of the chaos. You just try not to get squished, okay? Morty nodded weakly, though the fear and excitement in his eyes betrayed the thrill of being caught in such a bizarre, deadly, and fascinating universe. As they moved forward, the shadows lengthened across the ruined plaza, painting the landscape in eerie streaks of orange and black. Morty stumbled again, nearly tripping over a shard of metal embedded in the ash. Rick grabbed him quickly, muttering, Morty, the second you die, I'll have to explain to the multiverse why your death was my fault. Don't make me do that. Morty laughed, shakily, the tension giving way to a fleeting moment of comic relief. As he whispered, I think I'm going to die, Rick, but also, wow, this is insane. Rick smirked, scanning the horizon for the next point of interest, a warp-tainted shrine, a squad of patrolling guardsmen, and the faint green glow that promised more chaos than even he had anticipated. Morty, congratulations, he whispered under his breath. You're officially on your first true Warhammer 40K field trip. Buckle up, kid. It's gonna get messy. Rick Sanchez froze as a shadow fell across the ruined plaza, long and deliberate, accompanied by the faint, almost imperceptible hum of psychic authority. He glanced up and saw them, inquisitors, figures draped in ornate robes and armor that spoke of authority, judgment, and centuries of unyielding vigilance. Their presence radiated a weight that pressed on the mind, a psychic tension that made even Rick's usually unflappable intellect pause for a split second. Oh, Morty, this just got serious, he muttered under his breath, spinning his portal gun in his hand, like a nervous magician preparing for the grand reveal. The Inquisitor's eyes, glowing faintly with psychic wards and hidden sensors, scanned the ruins with surgical precision, immediately identifying anomalies, the portal residue, the faint interdimensional signature, and yes, the unmistakable chaos that followed Rick like a loyal dog. Morty froze beside him, eyes wide and trembling. Rick, they're looking at us. They're really looking at us. Rick's grin wavered into something more cautious. but only for a moment. Relax, Morty. We'll just charm them, okay? Charm them with science and sarcasm. It's my specialty. The Inquisitors advanced slowly, deliberately, their boots crunching softly over ash and rubble. Rick crouched lower, scanning their movements and calculating odds, escape routes, potential distractions, and the precise timing needed to avoid being vaporized. Okay, these guys are not regular Imperium meatbags. They're top-tier, judgment-calling, heresy-sniffing, let's make Rick regret everything types. But hey, we live for danger, right? He whispered. He pulled out a small device from his coat, a compact holographic emitter, and flicked it on. A flickering image of a warp-tainted explosion projected several meters away, drawing the attention of one of the Inquisitors. Rick ducked, holding Morty close. There, look, a minor diversion. Classic misdirection. Nothing to see here, everyone. Morty's eyes were glued to the scene, awestruck and terrified. Rick, they're not fooled. I can tell. They're not fooled. Rick's grin returned, chaotic and manic. Yeah, Morty, but they're investigating that first. Timing, kid, timing. And a little genius. The Inquisitor nearest to their hiding spot stepped forward, cloak swirling, mechanical augmentations glinting faintly in the orange haze. Rick froze, analyzing the figure's psychic presence. Every tiny ripple of energy betraying intent, experience, and unrelenting scrutiny. Okay, that's a high-level psychic scan. If he knows I'm here, we're toast, Rick muttered, running a quick mental simulation. Or maybe not. Maybe we can play it cool. Maybe we can negotiate. He tapped Morty on the shoulder, whispering, Morty, stick close, be invisible, and for the love of God, don't breathe too loud. Morty nodded frantically, his fear palpable, his hands shaking as he clutched Rick's coat like it was a lifeline. Rick decided to try something risky. He stepped slightly from behind the rubble, raising a hand in a vague gesture of submission, his portal gun at the ready. Greetings, honored Inquisitors, he called out, voice dripping with exaggerated respect. I'm, Rick Sanchez, totally harmless scientist, totally, and, probably very compliant. The Inquisitors paused, tilting their heads, psychic eyes scanning him like a predator sensing the exact nature of its prey. One whispered in low Gothic, a voice layered with psychic resonance that made Rick flinch. Anomaly detected. Presence outside sanctioned reality. Potential threat. Rick blinked, then grinned. Oh, potential threat? That's cute. Wait till you see my sidekick, Morty. He gestured toward Morty, who shrank behind him instantly, waving weakly and muttering, Hello? One of the Inquisitors moved closer, psychic presence expanding, making the ground beneath Rick and Morty feel like it was pressing down on them. Rick's mind raced, calculating probabilities for escape, charm, trickery, and raw scientific improvisation. Okay, no panic. We can talk our way out, maybe confuse them, maybe show them a little dimension-jumping magic. Yeah, that's my angle. He flicked his wrist, activating a micro-portal to project a shadow of himself several meters away, making it seem like he was stepping to the side while actually crouching low. The Inquisitor paused, gaze flicking toward the phantom projection. Rick muttered under his breath, Heh. See, Morty? Never underestimate the power of visual misdirection in the face of a galactic inquisitor. Morty was trembling beside him, whispering frantically, "Rick, I don't think this is working. They're still looking at us." Rick exhaled sharply, glancing at the psychic readings on his wrist scanner. "Okay, yeah, you're right. But we've got options. Always options." He tapped a series of commands into his device, creating a low-frequency hum that resonated with the Inquisitor's mechanical augments, subtly interfering with their sensor array. The closest Inquisitor flicked an eye toward the hum, confused, stepping back to recalibrate. Rick's grin widened. "Oh yeah, now we're talking. Science and chaos, kid. Science and chaos." The remaining Inquisitors advanced slowly, analyzing every ripple of psychic energy around them, the environment reacting to their presence. Rick ducked lower, whispering, "Morty, we've got to keep moving. Small steps, careful, and remember, the moment you act scared, they know." Morty nodded, biting his lip as they edged along the shattered walls of a ruined building. Sparks from distant machinery lit the hall in intermittent flashes, illuminating the tense standoff. Rick adjusted his goggles, scanning for exit points, potential distractions, and weak points in the Inquisitor's formation. "All right, Morty, think of it like a game of interdimensional chess, where the pieces want to melt your face. We just need to survive a few moves." Rick's mind raced with contingencies, each more audacious than the last, weighing the odds, the psychic pressure, and the sheer power of the Inquisitors against his own chaotic genius. "Morty, if we get out of this, we're legends. If not, well, at least it's a story for the afterlife, or a very messy obituary." He flicked his portal gun subtly, ready to create a distraction, a quick escape, or a minor miracle if the Inquisitors closed in too fast. The tension in the air was almost tangible, oppressive, yet intoxicating. A perfect playground for a mind like Rick's, a deadly dance of observation, improvisation, and interdimensional trickery that only he could navigate with both bravado and reckless genius. Rick Sanchez stumbled over jagged debris as the battlefield erupted around him, a chaotic symphony of fire, smoke, and screaming metal. Lasgun fire stitched the air in jagged arcs. Bolter shells exploded into walls, and the ground itself shook with the thunderous march of Mechanicus Titans, each step reverberating through Rick's chest like a drum of doom. He ducked behind a shattered wall, scanning the chaos with wide, manic eyes. "Oh, Morty, welcome to absolute madness," he shouted, dodging a ricocheting bolt. "This is every worst-case scenario in high-definition horror and war, all rolled into one glorious, terrible package." Sparks from ruptured machinery sparked in the air, mingling with the acrid smoke from burning terrain, creating a haze that twisted reality in subtle, disorienting ways. The psychic residue of the warp licked at the edges of Rick's senses, small whispers teasing his mind, beckoning him toward chaos, with a grin that mirrored his own. "Yeah, the warp's feeling feisty today. I like it," he muttered, twirling the portal gun lazily while scanning for patterns in the incoming fire. Morty flinched beside him, eyes wide and sweat-soaked, trying to keep pace as Rick guided him through the debris-strewn ruins. "Rick, this is insane. I can't even look at it all." Rick grinned, slapping him on the back lightly. Morty, quit whining and open your eyes. Look at it. Study the chaos. Every explosion, every marching titan, every scream of the soldiers. It's a lesson in physics, psychology, and interdimensional improvisation. And yes, probably a lesson in how to die horribly. But that's optional. Morty's stomach lurched as another volley of gunfire rattled nearby walls, the shockwaves throwing dust and sparks into their faces. Rick ducked instinctively, scanning the battlefield for opportunities and threats simultaneously. You see that, Morty? That's a chimera taking fire, and those guys are perfectly disciplined, for now. But every army has a pattern, Morty. Watch, learn, and maybe survive. Rick's attention snapped to a squad of space marines, bolters blazing, charging through the ruins with terrifying precision. Their armor shimmered under the firelight, every movement a deadly combination of muscle, machinery, and psychic shielding. Oh yeah, now that's a display of efficiency, he whispered, eyes gleaming. He tapped his scanner rapidly, noting weaknesses in their patrol arcs and timing the shots of distant artillery. See, Morty? Even the biggest, meanest soldiers have patterns. You just gotta see the rhythm in the chaos. A Mechanicus servitor clanked past them, a heavy coil of cables trailing behind it, and Rick reached into his coat, flicking a small device that sent a pulse of localized electromagnetic disruption. Sparks danced across the servitor's limbs, causing it to stutter in place and drawing the attention of a nearby priest. Rick chuckled softly. Oh, chaos. Your obedient children are so predictable. Morty clung to Rick's coat, almost vibrating with nervous energy. Ori, I think I'm gonna throw up. It's too much. Everything's moving. It's all... I can't. Rick glanced down at him, a mixture of amusement and exasperation in his expression. Morty, you're fine. You're alive. That's step 1. Step 2, observe. Step 3, manipulate a little bit. Step 4, survive. Easy. Another volley of bolter fire struck the ground just ahead, throwing fragments of concrete into the air. Rick ducked instinctively, grinning through the tension. Step 4 is kind of optional, Morty, but highly recommended. Across the battlefield, warp-tainted energy licked at the edges of reality, sending ghostly distortions through the air. Rick's eyes twitched with excitement. Oh, this is my kind of party, Morty. Explosions, chaos, reality bending just enough to make physics cry. Yes, science and anarchy. Couldn't ask for more. He flicked a small holographic device into the air, projecting illusory explosions in a distant alleyway, drawing the attention of a squad of guardsmen. See that, Morty? Misdirection, chaos management, and yes, a little light pranking. You're learning fast. Morty's jaw dropped, his fear mixed with awe, as he watched the soldiers react to a threat that didn't exist. Rick, I don't know if I can even... A loud boom cut him off, debris spraying around them. Rick ducked, flicking the portal gun slightly to create a micro-portal that swallowed a stray piece of rubble harmlessly. Morty, shut up and move. The universe doesn't wait for panicking kids. Rick's gaze swept the horizon, noting a column of chaos cultists emerging from the shadows, their twisted forms twitching unnaturally. Oh, hello there, nightmare fuel, he muttered, twisting his portal gun to create a tiny, destabilizing illusion in front of them. The cultists recoiled, snarling, before reforming their attack vectors. Morty, see? Even the ugly, warp-corrupted freaks are predictable if you know where to poke them. He ducked behind a ruined wall, scanning for another vector. This is all about understanding battlefield psychology, Morty. Everything has a pattern. Even chaos itself has a rhythm. Morty trembled beside him, glancing between Rick, the cultists, and the titanic war machines moving relentlessly across the rubble-strewn field. Rick's mind raced, juggling multiple threats, multiple opportunities, and the faint, alluring tug of the warp whispering at the edges of his consciousness. All right, Morty. Step 1. Survive the immediate explosions. Step 2. Manipulate small pockets of chaos to our advantage. Step 3. Well, let's see how far we can push this before something massive tries to squish us into pancake physics. Are you ready, Morty? Morty nodded weakly, gripping Rick's coat with white-knuckled determination. Rick smirked, spinning his portal gun with practiced ease as the battlefield around them continued its insane, chaotic dance of fire, steel, and warp-tainted energy, a perfect storm for improvisation, experimentation, and interdimensional survival. Rick Sanchez skidded to a halt behind a shattered wall as the first daemon erupted into view, its form writhing with impossible geometry, limbs bending in ways that should not exist, and eyes, or whatever counted as eyes, glowing with a malevolent, otherworldly intelligence. The air around it shimmered with warp energy, distorting reality and tugging at Rick's mind, whispering promises of power, madness, and disintegration. Oh boy, Morty, hold on to something solid, Rick muttered, gripping his portal gun tighter. Morty's voice trembled behind him. Rick, that thing, it's not real, right? It can't be real. Rick gave him a manic grin, eyes gleaming with a mix of terror and exhilaration. Morty, welcome to the universe. Real? Maybe. Dangerous? Definitely. And we're about to have a very intimate chat with it. He crouched lower, scanning the daemon's movements with his scanner, noting the erratic patterns of attack, the psychic distortions trailing its every motion, and the faint, rhythmic pulse in the surrounding air. A heartbeat, or maybe the echo of the warp itself. The daemon lunged suddenly, twisting through space with impossible speed, and Rick fired a microportal to divert part of its trajectory, sending it slamming into a pile of rubble with a shower of sparks and warped energy. Morty yelped, stumbling backward. Rick, did you just bounce it? Rick ducked another incoming lunge, firing a small EMP pulse that caused the daemon to shudder violently, its form flickering like a corrupted hologram. Yep, Morty. Physics, chaos, and a dash of interdimensional trickery. That's how we survive this little dance. Sparks and psychic energy sprayed around them, the heat and pressure making the air shimmer with unstable, almost liquid light. Rick scanned rapidly, plotting angles, exit vectors, and quick illusions to confuse the daemon, all while keeping Morty as close to him as possible. Another daemon emerged from the swirling warp mist, smaller, faster, and with limbs that flickered between solid and ephemeral. Rick's grin widened with manic excitement Oh, a pack. Morty, this just got spicy. Double the Daemons, double the fun, double the existential terror. He spun his portal gun, creating micro-portals at strategic points to deflect the smaller Daemons' attacks, while simultaneously projecting illusions of massive explosions behind it. The creature screeched in a way that made the hairs on Morty's arms stand up. "Rick, it's coming right at us!" Rick rolled, firing another pulse from the gun that destabilized the air in front of it, sending the Daemon reeling into the debris-strewn ground. Morty, that's the key. Use their chaos against them. Make them react to the thing that isn't there. Simple, elegant, and totally illegal in 3 dimensions. Morty's breathing was shallow, his hands shaking as he tried to keep up with Rick's rapid movements. Rick, I don't know if I can do this. They're too weird." Rick glanced back at him, eyes wild but focused. "Morty, you don't have to do anything. That's why I'm here. My job is chaos management. Your job is screaming a little, panicking appropriately, and maybe not getting eaten. Trust me, this is basically a tutorial in survival under extreme cosmic horror conditions." He ducked again as another Daemon lunged, spinning his portal gun to create a temporary rift that swallowed the attack and spat it several meters away into a crumbling wall. The Daemons screeched, reforming almost instantly, but Rick was already calculating the next microportal, the next diversion, and the next psychic disruption he could unleash. The largest Daemon yet emerged from the warp mist, a grotesque colossus with limbs that seemed to phase in and out of reality, teeth that glimmered with warp energy, and a gaze that made the blood in Rick's veins feel like liquid fire. Rick's grin didn't falter, though his heart raced. "Oh, jackpot. Morty, meet the big boss. Now pay attention, because this is how interdimensional chaos meets physics and sarcasm." He ducked behind a shattered pillar, firing 2 microportals almost simultaneously, one in front of the Colossus to deflect its charge, one behind to redirect its momentum. The ground shook violently as the Daemon collided with an illusion, roaring in frustration. Morty stumbled, wide-eyed and pale. "Rick, it's huge. I don't think we can—" Rick waved a hand, cutting him off. "Morty, stop talking. Watch and learn. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Or at least the more entertaining they are to manipulate." As the Daemon staggered, Rick tapped his wrist-mounted device, scanning its psychic signature and exploiting weak points in its warp-induced form. Sparks of interdimensional energy danced along his gun as he fired, creating micro-explosions and temporary rifts in reality that forced the Colossus to shift unpredictably. Morty clutched Rick's coat, trembling. Rick, I don't think this is safe." Rick laughed maniacally, ducking yet again as a limb slammed into the rubble beside them. "Morty, nothing in life is safe. Safety is for people who don't live in infinite universes full of screaming monsters. Now focus, because science and survival don't wait for courage. They wait for quick thinking and a little insane luck." Rick twisted, firing another pulse at the nearest Daemon, causing it to stagger and collide with its companion. He tapped the portal gun to project a shadowy duplicate of himself, drawing the attention of both mid-sized Daemons while the Colossus tried to recalibrate. "Perfect, Morty. Distraction, misdirection, and microphysics manipulation. See? Chaos isn't just random, It's strategic if you know what you're doing. Morty gasped, clinging tightly, as explosions, warp energy, and flickering daemons created a surreal, terrifying, and thrilling storm around them. Rick's grin widened, eyes glowing with manic determination. And this, Morty, this is how you tango with the warp. Teach Daemons some manners and survive long enough to tell a very weird story to your multiverse therapist. Rick Sanchez stumbled through the haze of smoke, fire, and warped energy, portal guns spinning in his hand like a baton of controlled chaos. The battlefield behind him was an endless panorama of destruction. Burning ruins, shattered titans, scattered squads of guardsmen, and daemons flickering in and out of reality, shrieking as they collided with the illusions Rick had meticulously crafted. Morty trailed behind him, wide-eyed and trembling, clutching Rick's coat as though it were a lifeline. "Rick, I don't think I can't keep up," he stammered, his voice quivering as yet another explosion rocked the ground beneath them. Rick's grin stretched wide, manic and chaotic, as he glanced over his shoulder. "Morty, quit whining and focus. You are keeping up. Just follow the patterns. Duck when I duck, and scream appropriately. That's Survival 101 in a universe that actively wants to eat you." Sparks danced from the portal gun as Rick activated multiple micro-portals, redirecting falling debris and ricocheting bolts away from them. The warp energy pulsed violently around them, the psychic residue of the Daemons like a living tide, threatening to pull them into madness. The ruins of a collapsed citadel loomed ahead, jagged steel and broken stone forming a maze of danger. Rick pivoted sharply, sending a micro-portal onto the ceiling of a twisted archway, deflecting a falling shard of debris that would have flattened Morty. "See that, Morty? That's thinking ahead. That's physics, chaos, and a little improvised art, all in one move." Morty gasped, ducking instinctively. Rick, we're gonna die. We're literally gonna die." Rick's grin widened further as he grabbed Morty's arm, yanking him along. "Morty, quit whining. You'll be fine if you trust me. We're not dead yet, so clearly my chaotic genius works." The ground shook beneath them as a Mechanicus Titan stomped past, oblivious to the two fleeing humans, its massive bulk creating shockwaves that toppled walls and scattered rubble in every direction. Rick used the vibrations to his advantage, timing a portal jump across the shaking terrain, landing lightly behind another barrier. A shriek tore through the battlefield, drawing Rick's attention. A daemon, twisted and flickering in the warp, lunged toward them from a rift that pulsed with green energy. Rick didn't hesitate, spinning the portal gun to open a temporary void between them and the creature, which collided with an illusory duplicate of Rick, staggering back in confusion. "Morty, observe. That's strategy, that's style, that's survival with flair." Morty's knees buckled slightly as he whispered, I can't watch this." Rick patted him on the shoulder, shouting over the chaos. "Morty, you are watching it. That's the important part. And if you pay attention, you might survive it next time." He activated a small field on the gun, creating a distorted corridor of reality that bent light, sound, and psychic energy, disorienting the pursuing Daemons and making them hesitate, giving Rick and Morty precious seconds to advance. They reached a shattered bridge spanning a chasm of molten rock and twisted metal, the heat radiating off the surface, making Morty stagger. Rick grinned, eyes gleaming with manic focus. Perfect. This is the finale of our little tour, Morty. Follow my lead, step carefully, and remember, the universe only occasionally wants to crush you today. He tapped a sequence on his portal gun, sending a micro-portal underneath the bridge that stabilized the crumbling metal and allowed them to dash across without collapsing into the inferno below. Morty's voice trembled as he gasped, "Rick, that's insane! How did you even—" Rick spun to him, interrupting with a manic laugh. "Ha, Morty, science, chaos, and the occasional interdimensional trick. That's how I roll. Now keep moving." As they neared the far side of the chasm, psychic energy surged, the air thick with the screams and whispers of enraged daemons. Rick swore under his breath, eyes darting for the next exit. "All right, Morty, this is the tight part. Warp pressure spiking. Daemons are angry, and we've got maybe 3 seconds before it all goes sideways. Keep your head down, follow my portal footprints, and don't touch the shiny bits." Morty clutched the coat tighter, shivering, muttering. Rick, I don't even." Rick smirked, spinning the portal gun in his hands, creating a layered series of microportals that zipped them through the battlefield like ghosts. Explosions rocked the ruins around them, debris rained down in glittering shards, and the distant war engines roared, oblivious to the fleeing pair. Finally, Rick spotted a stable point on the other side of the battlefield, a small area of open ground, untouched by the worst of the chaos. He pointed, eyes gleaming. "Morty, see that? That's our exit. Science, chaos, and precise timing. We make a break for it, and then, poof, we're gone." Morty nodded frantically, swallowing hard as Rick activated a final portal, larger and more stable than the microportals they'd used so far. He grabbed Morty's arm, and with a running leap, they disappeared through the swirling vortex, just as a daemon's clawed hand closed where they had stood moments before. Sparks from the portal danced across the ruins, illuminating twisted metal and war-torn structures in brief, surreal flashes. On the other side, Rick staggered slightly, catching his breath, grinning wildly. Morty collapsed beside him, gasping and shaking. "We made it! We actually made it!" Rick laughed, brushing ash and soot off his coat. "Morty, of course we made it. Did you doubt the genius? I mean, maybe a little, but clearly chaotic brilliance prevails." He spun the portal gun once, flicking through dimensions as if selecting the next adventure. "Now, Morty, catch your breath, enjoy the view, and maybe, just maybe, rethink volunteering for field trips in war-torn universes, full of screaming daemons and giant killing machines." Morty groaned, burying his face in his hands, muttering, "I never want to do that again." Rick snickered, tapping his foot impatiently. Yeah, I know, but admit it, Morty. That was one hell of a ride."